Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Okay, so I'll just read through the verse once. Tam atayashtim prasamiksha satvaras tato varuya pasasara bittavat gopyan vidavam nayamapayoginam shamam praveshtam tapaseritam mana. Okay. When Lord Sri Krishna saw his mother, stick in hand, he very quickly got down from the top of the mortar and began to flee as if very much afraid. Although yogis, this is, it's not the verse that I'm up to. That's number 4. No, that's okay. It's actually text 5. Mother Yasoda then embraced Krishna, allowed him to sit down in her lap, and began to look upon the face of the Lord with great love and affection. Because of her intense affection, milk was flowing from her breasts, but when she saw that the milk pan on the oven was boiling over, she immediately left her son to take care of the overflowing milk, although the child was not yet fully satisfied in drinking the milk of his mother, with drinking the milk of his mother's breast. Purport: everything in the household affairs of Mother Yasoda was meant for Krishna. Although Krishna was drinking the breast milk of Mother Yasoda, when she saw that the milk pan in the kitchen was overflowing, she had to take care of it immediately, and thus she left her son, who then became very angry, not having been fully satisfied with drinking the milk of her breast. Sometimes one must take care of more than one item of important business for the same purpose. Therefore, Mother Yasoda was not unjust when she left her son to take care of the overflowing milk. On the platform of love and affection, it is the duty of the devotee to do one thing first and other things later. The proper intuition by which to do this is given by Krishna. Tesham satatayuktanam bhajatam priti purvakam dadami buddhi yogam tam yena mam upayanti te. Bhagavad Gita 10:10. In Krishna consciousness, everything is dynamic. Krishna guides the devotees in what to do first and what to do next on the platform of the Absolute Truth. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Taksur Unmalatam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhayevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah. Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasade Gaur Bhaktavrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So usually I just talk to the audience and then the viewers listen on, so I'll talk a little bit to the viewers also before I begin. I'm at the apartment of Rati Krishna, and it's very, very ideal for my service. So I'm going to be holding at these monthly programs here. If you come, you'll see how ideal it is. And when I come in and out of New York, sometimes I'll give Bhagavatam class. So anyway, what I'm lecturing on, now I'll speak to the audience. Okay. You know, there's kind of a fad in ISKCON to read Prabhupada's books. And it's good when good fads catch on, you know, like Kirtan, everybody Kirtan Mela, Kirtan. So it's good, and this is like a good fad. And I know my Sheshaguru started page by page, be a sage. And, you know, it's just reading the Bhagavatam through, which is not particularly my style. You know, my style is to read and put everything in context, etc. But I saw that it's also effective. It's one of the first things I do in the morning, a half hour. And you know, you read through the Bhagavatam, just in the mood of almost basically relishing your relationship with Prabhupada. There's two ways to read, there's two ways to study. One way is that you read for knowledge, and one way is you read for rasa. This is described by Jiva Goswami in his commentary in the second verse of the Bhagavatam. So, so for me, it's, you know, I do read for knowledge and study and context and things like that, but it's also nice in this way to read for, like your rasa with Prabhupada, just hearing Prabhupada speak, listening submissively. And also because one of my main services is also writing. It gives me ideas, because it's not just you know, the rasa with Prabhupada. He's speaking, there's points, there's knowledge, I underline them, etc. So it's actually been a nice part of my sadhana now. And I'm up to the 10th canto, which is particularly relishable in terms of relationship with Krishna. So these things are always there. Like in this particular story, Prabhupada's told, you know, Mother Yasoda, and she's so beautiful, and she's cooking, and as she's cooking, she's singing the pastimes of Krishna. And that way, you know, and then there's poetry that's written, and therefore you can remember it. And it inspires you. And that's this is actually, in terms of Raganuga Bhakti, developing a spontaneous affection for Krishna, the two main ways to do it is to worship, to hear the Bhagavatam and hear about that love, specifically the 10th canto, and to worship the different forms of Krishna that inspire particular relationships. And it's so important also for your spiritual life to be inspired on that. It seems to me, in one sense, you know, bhakti is working on all aspects of the mind to purify them. There's the intelligence, the understanding. There's the mind, how you reject it and how you think of things. And then there's the ego, what your identity is. And generally speaking, what the ego does is it filters your experiences through your identity, to bolster your identity. So bhakti purifies the whole mind and intelligence by changing your identity. And changing your identity means as a devotee of Krishna, which means it's basically what your desire is. You have to want to be a devotee of Krishna. You have to identify in that way. So it's nice actually to hear the pastimes of Krishna and develop this inspiration that this is what I want. It creates in you a whole other reality. Your reality is created by your desires. You know, even sometimes, you know, they have kirtan melas, and you know, I said it's wonderful. During the Rath Yatra, they can have a kirtan mela, 10 to 3 p.m. in Tompkins Square Park. How great is that going to be? Then Times Square, and then the next day. But in the same sense, I really feel there has to be the philosophy, because that affects how you chant. It affects when you actually hear Shastra, it gives you conviction. And you're chanting, the degree of your absorption will be based on your conviction and your relationship. And that's what the Bhagavatam does. It gives you philosophical conviction, and it gives you a desire for relationship and understanding of relationship. So it's really nice to read the Bhagavatam in this way. And in this particular, and of course, when I'm reading through it, then these philosophical points come in, and here, it's a very, very interesting philosophical point. In fact, I began writing my next Monday morning readings based on reading this, which the title is, Can Changing Diapers Be Bhakti? Yeah, I'm kind of expert at that. Because it's such a question that comes all the time. The question that comes all the time is this dichotomy or apparent dichotomy between material and spiritual life. I was just in Connecticut. Lisa Marchand. Been around for many, many years, but probably now coming to the point of initiation. But just a housewife with 2 kids, opened up her own Bhakti Center. Very nice. I mean, it's called Bhakti Center, Connecticut. It's 1,500 square feet. You come in, there's a reception room and then a consultation room and then quite a big hall, probably as big as most temples in North America, the hall. I mean, I don't know if she uses that. Anyway, she has a plan for it. But, and I gave class and I met some people, and there was one person, he was quite serious, and the same thing, he's serious, he's reading, he's chanting 16 rounds, he's reading the books, but he has, 2, 3 children, and, the thought comes in the mind, bhakti is the goal of life, to serve Krishna. How do I reconcile the two? And it's the issue at hand, especially in material civilization, where the work tends to become more, as Prabhupada called, ugra karma. Work that's actually disconnected from service, the work itself. Maybe it's serving the, military industrial complex rather than, having a position in Vana Ashram where your work actually serves the community that's supporting the Krishna consciousness. So these types of questions of dichotomy between my life and my material and spiritual life become very, very prominent in people's minds. So I'm actually seeing this verse is very, very interesting, and it's a very, very deep point, because what's being said here is, and we're going to have to qualify and discuss it, is that there is no dichotomy. Ultimately, there shouldn't be a dichotomy between the material and spiritual life. And I know when I say that, so many questions come up in people's minds. But I think we can discuss that in the modern life, but I think we have to first discuss the principle that there's no dichotomy in what's called Uttama Bhakti, pure devotional service. Because what pure devotional service means, basically, if I would define pure devotional service in a very simple way, it's giving up private or selfish interest. That's what pure devotional service is. So if you're giving up private or selfish interest, then what interest are you taking to? And you're taking to the interest of the truth. And the interest of the truth is the interest of God, which is the interest and benefit for everything. And it's the only interest that's the interest and benefit of everything. Otherwise, so, and that interest doesn't just mean, chanting and hearing. It means what the Shastra says, and the Shastra covers all aspects of life. So basically, that's Uttama Bhakti, that's pure devotional service. No private interest. Private needs, personal needs can get covered within God's interest. But it's not a separate or private interest based on the ego of I'm searching for centership. Is that a word? Centership?
Is now.
I gotta make it now. I just made up a word. Based on centership, ego, superiority, control, material consciousness. So the universal interest in catching that and following that's Uttama Bhakti. And how does one do that? One commits oneself to the truth. How does one commit oneself to the truth? He commits himself to the representatives of the truth. And basically, that's why initiation, not just as a formality, but as a principle, is stressed in Bhakti and Uttama Bhakti. And one who actually has that, then that becomes the judgment by which they do everything else. It's not separate. Everything. Why do we do things? We do things because it's what we should be doing. Why? Because it's God's will. How do we know? Because it's what the Shastra says. So, that's the spirit. Then we can talk about the application in the modern world. But here, it's so nice. It says, okay, so sometimes there appears to be this dichotomy between directly serving Krishna. Of course, Mother Yasoda's example is, feeding Krishna or cooking for Krishna. But here it says, to see things first, it says the proper intuition by which we do this is given by Krishna. And then it quotes the Bhagavad Gita, Tesham satatayuktanam bhajatam prati purvakam dadami buddhi, that in Krishna, everything is dynamic. Krishna guides the devotee, what to do first and what to do next on the platform of the absolute truth. I always quote that definition of bhakti. I really like the association of Pradyumna. I think one of the things of being in New York is some of the senior Vaishnavas that come by, and Pradyumna lives here. Prabhupada's Pandit, and he gave the definition of bhakti is to make yourself available. That's bhakti. You're available for Krishna's will, for service, for seva. Actually, seva is the most important thing. All the Shastra is about seva. Seva takes precedence over everything. The reason we read Shastra for seva, That's what we read Shastra for. Even how we read Shastra. We don't read Shastra for power. We don't read Shastra to get knowledge. It's very our mood. We read Shastra as service to Krishna and to understand service, understand seva. So seva is seva. I always quote from an introduction to Bhakti Sandarbha that I read, what does seva mean? Seva means loving responsiveness to the Lord through the Bhakti is best expressed through seva, which is loving responsiveness to the Lord through the faculties of the mind, body, and words. That's what seva is. So then, what happens is not everything is direct seva to Krishna. Then why do we do it? Because everything, when you become a devotee, everything is secondary to developing love of Godhead. But because everything is secondary to developing love of Godhead, that doesn't mean that there aren't things that are not directly chanting and hearing Krishna that are not connected to that. I always quote, and I think it's a really important point, the verse in the Bhagavatam, Kamesanindriya Pritir Labho Jiveti Yavata, that they ask about sense gratification. What's the purpose of sense gratification? So it says, Kamasya Nandriya Pritir. Nendriya Priti. It is not for the Priti. Nendriya Priti. It's not for the love of the senses. What is sense gratification for? It's not for the love of the senses. But you do it, because without enjoyment, the body dies. So what do? You take what you need. So there's a purpose of it. It's enjoyment, but the purpose is not enjoyment in itself. It's enjoyment. We have enjoyment. We need enjoyment. Just like prasadam, there should be really nice prasadam in the family. It's so important. Psychologically, it's so important. And it should be tasty, and it's so important. Why? It's not that the goal of life becomes eating, but it's needed. For what? Well, you take what you need, what? For the satisfaction of the mind. For jivasya tattva jigyasa. So that you can actually realize God. So there are things that we do that are not related to Krishna. And what do? We do as much what we do because we need them. Not for themselves, but for the service of Krishna. So here Prabhupada says it's ultimately what Krishna wants. It's ultimately what Krishna wants. And it's not always chanting and hearing. It's not always chanting and hearing. And when it's not what Krishna wants, even chanting and hearing is not service for Krishna. Actually speaking. If you give an example, if a mother wants to chant and hear about Krishna, but her duty is to watch her child, and if she doesn't watch her child during the program, then the child is in danger, then which is bhakti? Sitting in the class, chanting and hearing, Well, the child is outside playing in the street, or is it taking care of the child? So ultimately, what bhakti means is doing what Krishna wants, which doesn't minimize chanting and hearing. And someone who actually has that strong desire in the heart to serve Krishna and to love Krishna and to chant, because after all, the main symptom of bhakti, this is also by Jiva Goswami, the main symptom of bhakti is our desire to chant and hear about Krishna. Anyway, here's the example of Mother Yasoda. She's cooking, right? She's chanting and hearing about Krishna. There's so many activities that are going on in Vrindavan. I wrote an article called Nam Kirtan, the Essence of the Bhagavatam. And one of the things I showed in the 10th canto is that whatever people are doing, they're chanting and hearing. So, so one who actually has that mood, that real mood of devotion, that's free from the consciousness of selfishness. The mother who wants to chant and hear about Krishna, but Krishna tells her to take care of her child. That mood of transcendence, of separate interest for the purpose of Krishna's interest, whether it's a duty even for one's purification, when one does that, one actually enters the door of bhakti. Because Sharanagati, surrender, is the door of bhakti. So one who is actually in that consciousness of wanting to serve Krishna and taking one's karma in life, not that, you know, I'm working because I want to, be, the richest man in the world, or I'm doing this because that, but does whatever their duty is, even if that duty is to be the richest man in the world, or whatever it is, for Krishna. And one actually does his duties and has that consciousness of consideration and selflessness and service. And they're surrendered, they're committed to truth above their opinions and desires, even if it takes them into the world. They enter the heart of bhakti, and the symptom of that is that they always want to chant and hear. And I see that too. I have to say that frankly, I see that. I mean, of course, I see elevated brahmacharis that are just preaching and distributing books all the time, and then you see people who've taken the saffron because they're lazy. You see that too, and then you see, and actually, it's nice when I see that dutiful people. They're just not selfish. They have responsibilities in the world. Whatever it is, it's their karma. It's what's on their plate. And they do it responsibly, and they're not selfish. I see that, two things happen. They really develop a taste for chanting and hearing. And when that opportunity when that opportunity, they avail themselves of that opportunity, they take it. Sometimes they get worried, as a sannyasi, because I don't have a job, I have a family. What do I do all day? and then it complicates it really, because I wake up so early, so I have a lot of time, and I really I'm conscious. Krishna is giving me this time. If I don't use it for chanting and hearing, if I take it for granted, then he'll take it away from me. And then in the next life, they'll have 6 kids and working all the time and just saying, oh, I wish I was able to chant and hear all the time. I wish and then, and then the person is working outside that has the 6 kids, and it's like, oh, I wish I was chanting it. And then the next life, he'll be the sannyasi. The real key is when you do have that opportunity, to take avail of it. I was recently on the phone with Shastra, who started with me. He funded the Puri Yatra. I used to call him Shivananda Sena, because Shivananda Sena in Mahaprabhu's pastimes, when the devotees had to go from Navadvip to Puri, he would manage it all. So I would call him Shivananda Sena, because he was the businessman, and he initially he sponsored the whole thing. In Kaveri, it was started with the Argentinian Yatra. You didn't know that?
No.
Gunagari Maharaj initially, he came to me. I was sitting in Gopal Raja's taking prasadam, and Gunagari Maharaj came in with Shastra and introduced me to him. And because he used to visit him in his business area, Rehoboth Beach, where he was staying. And then, okay, next year we'd like to go to, and Shastra will sponsor the whole thing. He'll sponsor the whole thing. So the following year with some Argentinians, and that was the thing where I did it with Madhavananda. We needed a place, and it started in the Prabhupada Hotel, which Advaita Maharaj made the famous comment that the only thing about this hotel that's Prabhupada is the name. And then he stole all the Mayavadi books that they were on the couch. I don't remember that, but something like that. But I said, now he's retired. So much problem, so much. Now he's just retired now, and he's going to Vrindavan. So the main thing is, the main principle I think here is, bhakti means no private interest in whatever you do. And when you do that, whether it is selfishly chanting and hearing or materialistically working, it's going to block your door from the path of Sharanagati. And I think the principle is also, the more you develop that desire for chanting and hearing, by the mood of Sharanagati, by the open heart of Gopi. What is Gopi? Kinkari. Krishna says, what you want. Gopi means kinkari. It means kinkari. What you want, I will do. By actually having that beautiful mood, Kiba Vipa, Kiba Nasi, Kenu Sudrahoy, wherever situation you're in, then your desire for chanting and hearing will increase, and your life can transform in a way that's actually available more. And this doesn't discount, when you're talking about this, that people do have their duties. They're prescribed according to their condition. So we have to also be careful that I'm not saying that just, being a grihasta is not one of the items of devotional service. and people enter into certain situations, everything we enter into Krishna consciousness is actually for the platform of detachment. Prabhupada in the Bhagavatam, in the purport, he describes that there's two types of brahmacharis, attached and detached. And we see that. They enter into the brahmachari ashram, attached and detached. Most are attached. So they enter the grihastha ashram. And what was the purpose of the grihastha ashram? It's detachment. It's detachment. There's fulfillment of desires, but what is the objective of that? So anyway, so this is, anyway, it's something that I'm meditating on and writing on, and I want to get it right. And of course, we have the whole Gita with Arjuna. And how much karma and gyan are the contaminants of bhakti. Karma and gyan. And we can see it even in the history of the Krishna consciousness movement. The contamination of gyan doesn't necessarily mean that you're renounced, but it means that your conception of spirituality is impersonal and renounced. At the beginning of the Krishna consciousness movement, the devotees were not renounced. Of course, there was an inspiration by Prabhupada that brought him, to certain levels of dedication. But because people were coming from the material world, coming from a certain culture of intense absorption, in their lifestyle was so unconducive to spiritual life, and they were so contaminated by the activities they were doing, Prabhupada brought everyone within the temple. There was no congregation. There's no congregation at the beginning. There's no congregation. It was you're in or you're out. It was the Sankirtan army, and you had to enlist. There's no civilians. And Prabhupada, and it's the fun, he had to preach detachment. At the beginning, if one is too absorbed in material life, it has to be broken. He preached detachment. And because he preached detachment, like Rupa Goswami says, of course, he didn't really preach detachment in that way. But the principle is at the beginning of spiritual life that has to be emphasized, because just like in Vrindavan, there are three main deities that represent the three aspects, philosophical aspects of Krishna consciousness, which is Sambandha Gyan, I'm just going to say metaphysics, conception of reality. It's a little bit. Abhideya Gyan, the means to realize it, and Priyojana, the goal, which is love of Godhead. So Madan Mohan is the deity for Sambandha Gyan, developing your relationship with Krishna. So how do you develop your relationship with Krishna? Well, you're going to have to break your relationship with the material world. Not necessarily the activities of the material world, but the conception and absorption in it for enjoyment and control. So to develop your relationship with Krishna, it's not going to develop if one is, getting stoned every day and, sex life every day and hippie life every day. So Madan Mohan, if that's your relationship with your body, the first part of Sambandha Gyan is I'm not the body. That's the first part. You want to understand. And what does the body mean? The absorption in the body means I'm the enjoyer and I'm the controller. And if you have that conception, how can you develop a relationship with Krishna? That has to be lucid. So Sambandha Gyan gives you the understanding. And what deity you worship? Madan Mohan. So what is Madan Mohan? Madan means Cupid and Mohan means bewilder of Cupid. To develop a relationship with Krishna, you have to loosen the attachment to Cupid. So that's the first part of spiritual knowledge. And when someone is so absorbed in that conception, that aspect of Sambandha Gyan, philosophical knowledge, has to be stressed. But the danger is, one, if it's just vairagya, without attachment, vairagya, the heart can become hard. No, no, no. If you really see a Mayavadi sannyasi, they're so dry. No, no, no. The heart just becomes so hard. And you develop a conception of spiritual life. That spiritual life means renunciation. And I always say it's dedication in bhakti. So our philosophy is yukta vairagya, balanced detachment. We give up those things that we cannot use in Krishna's service. And that way, simultaneously, we're practicing renunciation, but exercising the heart for bhakti. So, therefore, karma and gyan. So at the beginning, when that's the kind of preaching, then we saw in the Krishna consciousness movement, that somehow became the misconception of what bhakti is. That bhakti is renunciation, advancement means to take sannyas, and that the enemy of spiritual life is the opposite sex. And which is, but it's in a balanced way. Not just hating women like that. And then the other thing is karma, the contamination of karma, that spiritual life is the material activities to satisfy you. That becomes spiritual life. So, I just have a few more minutes here, but I want to wind this up. And there's just one more point here I think that's really important, is that when you hear Shastra and it makes you thoughtful, then you actually understand what bhakti is. And if you're not thoughtful and you don't raise your doubts, you generally fall into one of these two misconceptions. That bhakti is ritualistic, that what bhakti is, or spiritual life is ritualistic activities, or that it's renunciation. So when you hear carefully, then you understand it. That bhakti is dedication. And that dedication to what? To dedication and commitment to follow the truth. Which means what? To follow the Shastra and have faith in the Shastra, which means what? To be committed to those who represent the Shastra. And therefore, that is your consciousness. No matter what state of life you're on, whether you're a brahmachari, whether you're a sannyas, when you're a grihastha, when you're a vanaprastha, whatever occupation, that becomes your consciousness. And it doesn't necessarily mean what level of renunciation you're on, because there's people that are completely detached, that have no bhakti. That becomes your consciousness in everything. Never, and that's what pure devotional service means. No
private interest. And therefore, one whose situation, and I'll end it up now, situation and karma is to put them into family life and to put them into, taking care of children, etc. It doesn't, that's their situation. Maybe, by going through that ashram, one eventually becomes detached, but it doesn't prevent one from living a life of Uttama Bhakti. If their gauge and their judgment on life is what does Krishna want, and that can be applied no matter what situation you got yourself into by your own desires and karma. Once you surrender to Krishna, from whatever situation you're in, it can be Uttama Bhakti. You can be working in the world and it can be Uttama Bhakti. Because anything you do is for that reason. And if there's no reason to do it, then one does take sannyas. If there are no, or maybe not, because as Bhagavad Gita says, whatever a great man does, a common man will follow. So people also have duties and responsibilities, even when they are detached. But their compass is what is Shastra? What is, and how does my spiritual master explain that and apply it? How does the Guru, Sadhu, and Vaishnavas, what do they say? And it may not be, leave family, leave your job. That could be selfish according to Gita. Arjuna was asked to fight. That could be selfish. So this is the key point, and I thought in this particular verse, and I'm going to end here, that I love it, how it's presented, that the intuition is given by Krishna. What should I do? That there are more than one item of business to do for the same purpose. How do I do it? What Krishna wants. Okay, I'd like to keep on, our schedule. So, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.